whatever it is that you want, whether that's more money, whether that's better health, whether that's a six pack, whatever it is that you want, that thing is not actually what you want, right? What you really want are the feelings that you think that thing will get you, all right? And what this means is that what we really want at the end of the day is that elusive thing which we call happiness, all right? So Mo Goddard actually wrote a book called Solve for Happy, and in it he discusses an equation for happiness and a bunch of things that actually hold us back from happiness and how we can overcome these things in order to become more grounded, powerful, fulfilled, and better versions of ourselves overall. All right, now Mo Goddard was the ex-chief business officer of Google X, and he wrote this book after he lost his son at a very young age, and him and his son actually worked on this model of happiness together. And when anyone asks me what book I would recommend to them, I definitely say that Solve for Happy, subtitled Engineer Your Path for Joy, is one of the most influential books that I've ever read in my life. All right, now in this book Mo discusses the 6 grand illusions that actually hold us back from experiencing that state of happiness, that state where everything just seems to be going like it should, and that state where we just feel good about ourselves and the way our lives are going. All right, now the equation that Mo Goddard actually proposes for happiness is that happiness is greater than or equal to your perception of the events in your life minus your expectation of how you wish life would behave. All right, so anytime that our perceptions are of the events in our life are, let's say, they're greater, yeah, they're greater than the expectation that we have of how we wish life to behave, that's when we're happy. All right, so it is these 6 grand illusions that actually mess with the equation, whether on the side of our perceptions or our expectations, and actually hold us back from experiencing life to its full extent. So the first grand illusion is the illusion of thought. So here's something to think about. All right, that little voice in your head is not actually you. Now if you place your brain under a fMRI scan, all right, they've done this, and if you talk to yourself, then the part of your brain, or if you talk out loud, all right, sorry. So if you're talking out loud, the part of your brain that lights up is the same part of your brain that lights up when that little voice in your head is talking, all right? So in other words, that voice that you hear in your head is literally your brain talking, and that's just the fact that you're the only one that can listen to it. So why is that important? So here's something that happened to me recently. All right, I'm driving down the road, and there's some aggressive driver behind me. He's flashing his lights, he's honking, but I'm just going on my way. I'm like, whatever, he can keep doing what he's doing. And then suddenly he overtakes me and cuts me off really badly. Now in that moment, my emotions were stimulated, my heart was beating fast. I had these thoughts going in my head that, yo, what the fuck, I'm gonna fuck this guy up, I'm gonna beat the shit out of him, I'm gonna do this, how dare he, yada yada yada. All right, now obviously all of us have experienced this. This is when the parasympathetic nervous system is getting stimulated, the fight or flight response, and we think that just because the situation happened, it's causing us to feel a certain way. But the truth of the matter is that aggressive driver actually had not much to do with the state that I was experiencing. The real reason that I was experiencing those negative emotions is because of the negative thoughts that were going on in my head. Now this is not the only time that I've experienced the fight or flight response, because the thing is that a lot of us tend to identify with our thoughts and in turn just begin to embody the thoughts that are not serving us. Because in that moment, what could I have done? I couldn't have done jack shit. All right, the guy is gone, the situation is over, but that incessant thought patterns are actually holding me back from actually expressing the most powerful version of myself. So in that moment, what is one to do when we experience these negative thoughts, when they're just coming in and there's not much we can do about them? How do we actually deal with them so that we can express the most powerful version of ourselves? Well, the point is that you have to learn to disassociate your identity from the thoughts that you're experiencing, right? Especially when they're negative. So what did I do in that moment? I took a deep breath through my nose, kept it in for a bit, and let it out, right? I watch those thoughts go by. And this is why a mindfulness practice like meditation can help a lot, because you begin to just sit there and you're observing your thoughts as they're going by, all right? You're not latching on to any one thoughts. And the analogy that I really like to describe this is that thoughts are like clouds in the sky, all right? Clouds are coming, they're going, but you are the backdrop. You are the sky, and you are ever present, and the thoughts are just coming and going. So the point is not to latch on to any thoughts, and just realize that you are not your thoughts and you are something that is behind them, all right? And this brings us to the second grand illusion, which is the illusion of self. So if you are not your thoughts, then what are you? That's what this begs the question, right? What are you if you aren't your thoughts? Because it seems like that's the only thing that's going on in your head. Well, there is something called the permanence test, all right? So if a description of you or a characteristic of you changes while you otherwise remain the same, then that characteristic or description is not actually you. So this is something that I experienced when I took my first ever solo trip, all right? So I was supposed to go with my cousin. I was supposed to go to Amsterdam, all right? We decided that we're like, yo, let's check it out. We've never been to Netherlands before, and yeah, so let's check it out. So I booked my ticket, I booked my hotel, and it was all set. And last minute, my cousin bails on me, all right? I'm like, oh shit. So I'm supposed to either I go alone because I've already made my bookings and my reservations, or I waste my money and don't go because going alone is pretty scary. That was the first time I ever went alone. So I decided to take the trip, and I remember I'm sitting at the hostel, and I'm like all by myself, and I'm like, shit. Now this is the box that I put myself into. I'm like, yo, I'm an introvert, man. Like, how am I supposed to go out there alone? How am I supposed to actually interact with all these people? How am I supposed to actually go out there and make new friends if I'm an introvert? All right, now that's the box that I put myself into. But when I was forced to be in an environment where either I would cling on to this identity and not talk to anyone and not make any new friends, or I actually go out there and talk to someone, which would actually go against his identity. So there was a lot of resistance. I still remember it. I was sitting there, and there was a guy sitting across from me, and I was contemplating in my head. I'm like, yo, should I go talk to him? Should I go ask him? And I went and I said, yo, how's it going? Where are you from? All right. I remember my heart was racing, and either way, I took the action and I talked to him, and that turned out to be small talk type of conversation, but then that led me to talk to the next person and the next person and the one after that. And by the end of the trip, I basically like knew everyone at the hostel. I knew the bartenders at the bar. I was talking to like the bouncers at the club, and like basically I knew a lot more people than I did before I got there, all right? And the point of the matter is that after putting myself through that situation, I was like, shit, I thought I was an introvert, but here I am in this environment where I didn't know anyone before I got here, but now I basically know everyone. So I guess I'm not an introvert. And that is something that I thought about a lot. And what I realized is that the identity, the self that we so-called tend to identify with, is actually nothing but an illusion, all right? Because at the end of the day, it's nothing but a clinging on to a set of stories that you told yourself about the past, all right? And then using that to actually make decisions about the future. And here's why that doesn't work. Because when we tend to associate with a certain identity, there's also a desired self which we want to become, all right? And when we tend to have this identity, then that desired self, and we try to take action towards that desired self, then that self is something that clings to itself. So there's a lot of chaos that goes on, and that just makes it so much harder to change, all right? So once you realize and once you heed the wisdom of Bruce Lee and you actually become like water, adjusting to whatever situation you come across, then you realize that the identity is completely malleable and you can do anything that you want to do and become whoever you want to be. And the real self is something that cannot be grasped, all right? Because it is not an aspect of this physical world. The self that we think is the self, this body, this physical avatar that we have going through this physical world, is not the true self. The true self is something that is like the depth of the ocean. It's something that you don't have the instrument to actually even perceive, all right? And the point is that you begin to realize that identity is completely malleable, and you can become whoever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do, because everything is open to your expression. All right, and that brings us to the third grand illusion, and that is the illusion of knowledge. All right, so anytime a new paradigm is introduced to the world, maybe you haven't thought about these ideas before, there is a cycle that it goes through, all right? And that cycle is DDAA. And that is the first, there's a discovery of some new paradigm, some new idea that is introduced. Then there is debate about it because people are clinging to the previous idea and they don't really want to accept this. But then eventually, once they realize that, okay, it might actually be true, then they accept it. And then eventually that just leads to arrogance, where it's like, okay, this is true because it's always been true. And that is a cycle that every new idea goes through, all right? For example, when first they used to think the earth was flat, then who was it? Galileo told us that no, it's not flat, or Aristotle, I think it was the ancient Greeks for sure, told us that the earth is not flat. There was a lot of debate, there was a lot of conflict over that idea. Eventually it got accepted, and then now we're gone to the point where it's pretty much, we're arrogant about it. Now there's a lot of flat earth theories going on. I won't dive into that too much anymore, but the fact of the matter is that eventually we just become arrogant to what we think we know, because we're like, yo, we made it so far in life, so we must know something because we made it this far. But the problem with the illusion of knowledge is that it keeps us from seeing the reality behind all the other illusions, all right? So if these ideas are something you haven't thought about before, there might be some resistance towards them, and that will eventually hold you back from actually seeing through these illusions, all right? We tend to cling to the knowledge that we think we already know, but you have to heed the wisdom of Socrates, all right, who said that the only thing I know is that I don't know, all right? And Confucius said that true knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance, all right? Now, this is something that is coming from philosophers who are basically thousands of years old, and they've survived, their legacy has survived to this point. So the fact that they're saying this, who the fuck do you think you are that you think you know everything, all right? And this is something that I've definitely found out myself. The more I read, the more I learn, the more I, grow in my journey, I realize that the more I have only glimpsed just the tip of the freaking iceberg, all right? Because the rabbit hole goes deep, and the more you know, the more you realize that you don't know, and you just enjoy the endless journey of trying to relinquish control from what you think you know, and just identifying as the lifelong learner, all right? And the next grand illusion is the illusion of time, all right? Now, what is time? This physical, mechanical construct of time, which we're like, oh, it's 5 a.m. right now, yo, it's 6:30 a.m. right now, p.m., whatever. That is purely a human construct, all right? Einstein told us that time is actually not separate from space, and that these two aspects actually come together in a 4-dimensional structure called space-time, in which the past, present, and future exist concurrently. So when the pull of gravity is stronger, then time is actually moving faster, all right? So what this means is that time is actually not moving. Time just is. It is us who are actually moving through time. So the point is that you stop trying to associate with, you're not a slave to the task. You're not a slave to the clock. You're a master of the task, because time in itself is something that, yes, it makes things more convenient, but is completely based on perception, because you are the one that's moving through time. And I'm sure you've experienced it where sometimes an hour goes by like a few minutes, but other times it goes by like a few hours, even though it's the same mechanically, it's the same amount of time, but your perception of it is different, and thereby your experience of it is completely different as well, all right? And that brings us to the fifth grand illusion, which is the illusion of control, all right? Now, a lot of us, we're taking action towards our goals, we're getting feedback, but then when we fall short of our goals, that's when we tend to beat ourselves up and think that, man, like, shit, I didn't achieve my goal, so this is a bad thing. But in Buddhism and Eastern philosophy in general, they have something known as detachment. And that means that, yes, you are entitled to the action towards your goals, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions, all right? And that means that, yes, you just take the right action, because that's the only thing you can do. In life, there are two things, all right? Things within your control and things outside of your control. And Stoicism, the ancient Greek philosophy, tells us to only associate with the things that are within your control and forget everything else. At the end of the day, you only have control over your thoughts, and you only have control over your behaviors. So the point is to take action, yes, And then if you didn't achieve your goal, sure, you just take that as feedback and adjust again. All right, you have a theory about what you should do, you do it. You go to the marketplace, you go to the environment and actually take action, you take the feedback, and then you just reiterate. And that's just a constant cycle that goes on forever, because at the end of the day, there are factors outside of our control and we can't do anything about them. So there's no point wasting our mental bandwidth over them, because that will not do you any good. And that brings us to the sixth and final grand illusion, and that is the illusion of fear. All right, now in the ancient environment that our ancestors actually evolved in, fear served as a survival mechanism, because we needed that fight or flight, because it was a harsh environment, there were dangerous predators, and we needed that fear to actually keep us alive. But in our modern environment, this fear no longer serves us, because a lot of these things that we actually get the fight or flight response over is actually damage to our psychological well-being rather than our physical well-being. All right, so we tend to go through the incessant thought, which goes back to the first grand illusion as well, and that just holds us back and keeps us from experiencing that happiness. So the point is that fear in the ancient environments that our ancestors evolved in, yes, it served a purpose, it served us keep us alive. All right, but in our present environment, it's actually destroying us, because it's releasing the hormones of stress, and these hormones of stress just have a bunch of negative effects on our body and hold us back from experiencing life for what it truly is. So the point is that now we have to actually use fear as a compass. All right, if you fear something, if you're resisting something, that's just a signal for you to actually go and pursue it, because that is where the area of growth actually exists for you. All right, so this is my first video on how to be happy. Mo Goddard dives into a bunch of other topics on this as well, and I'll make some more videos on this. But just know that these 6 grand illusions are actually holding you back from experiencing life to its full potential, and once you see them for what they are, implement the daily practices that will help you overcome them. And if you feel like you've been wrestling a bout of depression, or if you feel like you have more to offer to the world and there's just something holding you back, it is possible that as a man you have suboptimal levels of testosterone. So click the link below and watch the free video training that I made for you. It was actually a previous webinar where I went over the 3 secrets on how you can naturally increase your testosterone level and move towards a more grounded and powerful version of yourself. All right, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. This has been Mo Salim from mosalim.com, and I'll see you soon.